Many Australian schools are falling well below the national average when it comes to student-teacher ratios. That's according to new data released today as part of News Corp's Schools Hub initiative, revealing the average student-teacher ratio is 13.3 students for every teacher. In primary schools, this increased to an average of 14.5 students per teacher, while in high schools, this dropped to 11.9 students per teacher. Joining me now live is News Corp journalist Jo Hildebrand. Jo, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Lovely to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
That's an interesting statistic. So around 13 students per teacher on average.
Yeah, the interesting thing is this is part of our Best in Class campaign that all the News Corp mastheads have been doing, and I've been really, I've got to say, personally, deeply committed to and honoured to be a part of, where we're basically trying to unpick some of the issues that are happening in our schools, in our classrooms, find out what the systemic problems are, and then find out how we can actually break through and solve these problems. And so we've both been looking at the crisis in teacher shortages, for example, which is very salient to this data, this information, but also looking at schools that are using innovation or technology or just incredibly effective teaching practices to turn their results around. And there have been some fantastic schools that are doing it. This is, I suppose, an aggregation of all the Australian Curriculum and Assessment Reporting Authority data that is already out there, but we've basically put it all together in one spot so that parents can look at their school and say, all right, what are the staff student or the teacher student ratios in my school? But the most important thing it does is highlight how every school is different and every school is meeting different needs for different communities. So a good example, for example, is there's a school in South Australia where the teacher-student ratio is more than 40 students to every teacher.
Wow.
But you look back and you think, well, hang on a minute, that's a distance education school, that's a school of the air, servicing remote communities. So clearly it's a school that doesn't even have a campus where the kids are rocking up, it's doing things remotely. So it's like comparing the Royal Flying Doctor Service to Prince Alfred Hospital. So there's that. There's community schools in Melbourne, for example. There was one which had just 3.5 equivalent full-time teachers, but it just had 10 students. So it actually had an incredibly high, and you might know, as a big thing, the hippies used to have their little community schools. Parents would often be teachers themselves. So it's not necessarily a way to say this school good or this school bad or this school better or worse than this other school, but it's a great way of actually sort of pulling the rug back and saying, all right, here are these schools that are doing all sorts of different things. What is going on there? And there's other stuff, for example, in Sydney, for example, New South Wales has a really good low average. It's the New South Wales and WA have the two lowest student to teacher ratios. But for some reason on the Central Coast, just north of Sydney, it's actually significantly higher. It's about 15 or something. So why is that happening just on the Central Coast? And strangely enough, there doesn't seem in a lot of ways to be big gaps between public and private. But again, there's a school, there's a Muslim school in Sydney that has quite a high ratio. I think it's about 24. Well, why is that? Is that because it's difficult to find enough teachers who are qualified to teach according to Muslim traditions? There's a Catholic primary school in Dubbo that's also got a very high ratio. So does that tell us there's a problem in recruiting teachers to the bush? So a lot of people, and I know a lot of people in education, get very nervous about any kind of ranking or any kind of score coming out because they say, well, it doesn't tell the full story. But I think it is a great way to actually say, right, here's the data. That's not the end of the story, but it's a great way to dig deeper and get into the story and say, right, what is happening here? And again, are there schools achieving great results without necessarily having low ratios? Because that's another conversation. But as you can see, I'm completely and utterly obsessed with this subject. I've had my head in it for over a month now.
Absolutely. I mean, this really provides a really great overview, I think, as well across the country.
Yeah.
And one of your points there about recruitment.
Yeah,
and we've particularly in New South Wales seen a lot of rolling strikes this year by teachers.
Yeah.
So you wonder, is recruitment an issue in some of these schools where perhaps the ratio isn't as good as what it could be?
It's huge, and it's a vicious circle as well. And so, again, I could talk about this till the cows come home, but you've got enrolments that are dropping off by about 16% over the past decades, enrolments for teaching courses, teaching degrees. So fewer and fewer young people are wanting to become teachers. Then when they actually do make it, finish their degrees, graduate, go into the classroom, there's a drop-off rate that is astronomical. I think it's somewhere between 30 and 50% in the first 5 years. Now, that is a disaster in any profession, let alone a profession that is the most important in my view, because it's the profession that sets up everyone in society to go up and get jobs of their own and to put them on a path for life. So that is a massive problem, and it is a problem if there are teacher shortages and that is producing poor outcomes for students, and then parents think that the system is failing them and then they blame the teachers, then there's going to be more teacher shortages, because one of the big reasons that people don't want to become teachers is because they feel that teaching is not respected. And there's anecdotal evidence of teaching families. I'm a teacher, my mum's a teacher, half my family teachers, but there's anecdotal evidence of, parents who are teachers saying to their kids, whatever you do, don't become a teacher, it's not worth it.
Wow.
That is horrendous, and that has to stop. So we've got to actually sort of celebrate our teachers, put them right up there and say, you're doing an amazing job. Whatever we can do to make it easier for you, cutting down on paperwork and bureaucracy and crap like that.
You'd think so.
Incentivising them to stay in the classroom instead of going to administration. I mean, all this stuff. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's part of what this new the schoolshub.com.au is, where you can go if you want to see all the data. But that's just sort of part of this much bigger project that we're doing to try and shine a light on education. Yes, on where the problems are, and yes, on where the roadblocks are, but also on what we are doing right, because there is so much we're doing right. And if we just rolled that out to other schools, other parts of the country, a lot of these problems would instantly be solved. So
absolutely. Look, it really is such a terrific campaign, and if our viewers want to find out more, they can, to compare their own schools, that is, go to theschoolshub.com.au. Well worth checking it out, and as we said, gives an overview of where schools are at.
It does, and it's just opening the window so you can then go out and explore the terrain there. And I've got to go and pick up my kids from school now.
Well, there you go. We better let you go then, Joe. Great
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Have a lovely weekend.
Joe Hildebrand, thank you.